In the quiet town of Maple Ridge, Georgia, where holiday parades and neighborly waves were part of everyday life, Alan and Rebecca Whitmore were seen as the perfect couple. Their home stood at the corner of Hawthorne Lane, a two-story colonial with navy blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and an immaculate lawn that changed decorations with the seasons. Every December, the house turned into a miniature winter wonderland, twinkling lights on every edge, wreaths on each window, and a life-sized nativity scene on the front lawn. The Whitmores were, by all accounts, what everyone in the neighborhood aspired to be: successful, happy, in love. Alan was a high school science teacher, the kind who stayed late to tutor struggling students and spent weekends setting up experiments for science fairs. He wasn't flashy or loud, just steady, dependable in a way people admired but rarely found exciting. Rebecca, on the other hand, was magnetic. A real estate agent who seemed to know everyone in town, she had a smile that made strangers open up to her, and a wardrobe that always looked one step ahead of fashion trends. They met in college, married young, and built a quiet life together, one free of scandal or gossip. Or so everyone believed. They were regulars at church on Sunday mornings and hosts of the most talked-about Christmas party every year. Friends described them as solid. Family described them as inseparable. Alan adored Rebecca, and his admiration for her was visible in the smallest gestures, from the way he always opened doors for her to the careful attention he paid to her moods. She in turn called him her rock. For a long time, he believed her. But small changes began to creep in. They were almost invisible at first. Rebecca started taking more calls in private, stepping into another room when her phone rang. She claimed her job was getting more competitive, that she needed to be available for clients at all hours. Alan didn't question her. He wanted to be supportive. When she began working weekends, he started doing more around the house: laundry, groceries, cooking dinner. He told himself it was temporary. After all, her career had really taken off lately, and he was proud of her. Then came the late-night texts. Alan would wake up and see her illuminated by the glow of her phone, typing quickly, and then pretending to be scrolling through social media when she noticed him stir. She insisted it was just group chats with friends, silly stuff he wouldn't care about. He wanted to believe her. But he began to wonder. There were little things too, like the new perfume she didn't wear around him, or the leather handbag she said was a gift from a grateful client, though he noticed the same bag in a fashion magazine with a price tag higher than their monthly mortgage. When he asked her about it, she brushed him off. "Work perk," she said with a laugh, her tone light but her eyes guarded. Alan didn't press. He'd always given her space, trusted that honesty was the foundation of their relationship. But doubt had started to settle in, like a low fog that never fully cleared. On December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas, Rebecca told Alan she needed to run errands alone. Last-minute gifts, she said. She left around noon and didn't return until after dark. When Alan asked if she needed help carrying things in, she told him she had them delivered straight to her office. She looked tired, but wired, like her nerves were on edge. She disappeared into the bathroom and stayed there for almost an hour. That night, after she went to sleep, Alan couldn't resist anymore. Her laptop sat open on the dining table, logged in. He told himself he was only going to check the Christmas budget, but one tab led to another, and soon he found himself staring at a browser history filled with searches that made his stomach turn. Flights to Belize, international real estate listings. A strange email account under a name he didn't recognize. His heart pounded. He clicked through messages, photos, records, each one a blow harder than the last. Rebecca wasn't just hiding something. She was living an entirely different life. And the woman he thought he knew better than anyone in the world, she was a stranger. The illusion of their perfect marriage had been shattered, and Alan was left staring at the pieces. Alan stared at the laptop screen long after the house had gone quiet. The soft hum of the heater, the ticking of the kitchen clock. Every sound felt distant, muted, under the weight of what he was discovering. At first he couldn't make sense of it. There were emails, hundreds of them, sent from an account under the name Samantha Hart. The sender photo was Rebecca. Her face, her smile, unmistakable. But the language was different, flirtatious, confident, even reckless. She was speaking to someone named Marcus Delaney, a man she referred to as M. The messages stretched back over a year. They were detailed, emotional, intimate. This wasn't some fling. It was a relationship, and it had been going on in parallel with their marriage, carefully hidden behind passwords and false names. Alan dug deeper, methodically clicking through folders and archives. The photos shook him the most. Samantha, on a yacht, sipping wine beside Marcus, posing in front of a skyline that was clearly not Georgia. Miami, maybe. In one video, she gave a tour of a lavish condo, speaking to the camera like a hostess on a reality show. She laughed easily, wore clothes he'd never seen before, and introduced herself as an art advisor based in Atlanta. Alan felt physically sick. He knew she staged properties for her real estate job, but this wasn't staging. This was her world, one he had no part of. There were also financial records: PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, small payments from Marcus, then larger wire transfers between accounts. Alan's name appeared in places it shouldn't have. Digital signatures attached to documents he never signed. One caught his eye: a lease agreement for a high-end apartment in Atlanta. It had been active for 8 months. She'd told him she was working weekends. In reality, she had been splitting her life between 2 cities, 2 identities, 2 men. Alan tried to remember the last time they had been happy. Genuinely happy. Not just smiling for photos or laughing in front of friends, but quietly, intimately connected. He couldn't find a recent memory that felt real anymore. Everything was cast in doubt. Had their marriage been unraveling longer than he realized? Had he missed all the signs? Or had she become someone entirely different, someone capable of compartmentalizing a life so cleanly that even her own husband had no clue? One folder stood out: Escape Plan. That was the actual title. Inside were documents that terrified him more than anything else. A scanned passport application under the name Samantha Hart, a new mailing address in Belize, copies of bank transfers, large sums being siphoned from their joint account into a new offshore one. Rebecca had made plans not just to leave him, but to disappear completely. She wasn't asking for a divorce. She was preparing to vanish, and she had every detail mapped out, down to the date. December 26th, the day after Christmas. Alan sat back in his chair, numb. The reality of it all settled over him like a storm cloud. While he was putting up lights and planning their holiday menu, she was preparing her exit. She had smiled at him over dinner, exchanged gifts with his family, kissed him goodnight, all while knowing she would be gone in days. That betrayal cut deeper than the affair. The deception, The ease with which she played her roles, the cold precision of her plan. It broke something inside him. He went to the liquor cabinet, poured a drink, and stared out the window. Snow had started to fall, gently blanketing the street. It looked peaceful. But Alan's mind was racing, filled with questions he couldn't answer. How long had she been planning this? Would she have told him eventually? Or would he have woken up one day to find her gone? No note, no explanation, just silence. Part of him wanted to confront her immediately, to wake her up and force the truth out of her. But another part, one colder, darker, told him to wait, to keep quiet, to watch her the way she had watched him, unsuspecting, unguarded. If she could live a lie, so could he, at least for one more day. And so he waited. Christmas morning would arrive soon, and with it, answers, or consequences, or both. Christmas morning arrived draped in silence. Snow had continued falling overnight, frosting the town in white. Maple Ridge looked like something from a postcard, clean, calm, and untouched. But inside the Whitmore house, nothing felt pure. Alan lay awake before the sun rose, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts spiraling. Just down the hallway, Rebecca slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed double life had collapsed in the space of a single night. He had learned everything, about Marcus, about Belize, about the secret money and the lies. And now, he had to decide what to do with it. He moved through the house like a ghost. He brewed coffee, fed the dog, turned on the soft, twinkling lights on the tree. It was all muscle memory, the routine of a husband playing the role of Christmas host. But he wasn't present. He couldn't stop imagining the messages, the photos, the betrayal. Every smile she gave him now felt rehearsed. Every word she'd ever spoken suddenly felt fake. And what disturbed him most was that she had been so convincing. She hadn't just fooled him, she had made him believe he was the center of her world, all while plotting her escape behind his back. Rebecca woke up around 8. She came down in a robe, yawning, hair tousled, acting like nothing was wrong. She kissed him on the cheek, complimented the smell of the coffee, and asked if he wanted to open gifts before or after breakfast. Alan smiled, nodded, and followed her lead. The performance continued. She handed him a box wrapped in gold paper. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, monogrammed with his initials. "For your thoughts," she said with a smile. He nodded, thanked her, but said little else. He gave her a necklace, sterling silver, something he'd picked up last week without knowing she was planning to leave. She held it up, admired it, and hugged him. The way she wrapped her arms around him made him freeze inside. He kept wondering how many times she had done the same with Marcus, how many times she had rehearsed that same gesture with someone else. As the morning went on, Alan's restraint began to crack. The sound of her laughter grated on him. Her phone kept buzzing, and he imagined Marcus on the other end, waiting for the signal. Maybe they had planned everything together. Maybe Marcus was in on it fully, ready to welcome her into a new life, built on stolen money and lies. Alan felt rage brewing beneath his skin. It wasn't loud. It was quiet and deep and slow, like hot tar spreading through his veins. Around mid-morning, he asked her to sit with him in the living room. The fireplace was burning softly. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. Rebecca curled up on the couch beside him, her eyes scanning her phone until he asked her to put it down. She did reluctantly, setting it on the coffee table. He asked about Belize. She froze. He asked about Marcus. Her expression shifted. She didn't bother to deny it. Instead, she shrugged. There was no apology in her tone, no guilt in her eyes. She explained that things had changed, that she needed more than this life, more than what he could offer. She said it plainly, as if discussing a canceled vacation, not a broken marriage. Alan sat perfectly still, his breathing shallow. She talked about independence, about finding herself, about starting over. She didn't mention love, not once. She didn't even ask how he'd found out. It was as if she had been waiting for the moment, ready for it, indifferent to how much it might hurt him. And that, more than anything, was what undid him. The next moments happened without plan, without thought. Something inside him gave way. All the long nights, the humiliation, the confusion, the betrayal, they collided in one terrible instant. He stood up. She didn't move. He reached for her. She tried to speak, but it was too late. The struggle was brief. The room once so full of warmth was now heavy with silence. The Christmas tree lights blinked gently, casting shadows across the room. The fire crackled. Outside, the town remained peaceful, wrapped in snow, unaware of what had just taken place in the picture-perfect Whitmore home. Alan stood over her, breathing hard, staring down at the woman he no longer recognized. At 11:14 a.m., the 911 dispatcher received a call from Alan Whitmore. His voice was steady, controlled, almost too calm. He told them his wife had collapsed, said she wasn't breathing. When asked if she was responsive, he said no. When asked if he had tried CPR, he paused, then said yes. An ambulance was dispatched immediately, and within 10 minutes the quiet street of Hawthorne Lane was disrupted by flashing lights and urgency. The paramedics entered a house that still smelled of cinnamon and pine. Christmas music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen. The stockings were still hung neatly on the fireplace. In the living room, Rebecca Whitmore lay motionless on the rug in front of the tree, still dressed in her robe. Her head was tilted unnaturally to one side, her skin pale, lips slightly parted. There were no visible signs of blood or trauma. At first glance, it looked like a tragic medical emergency, perhaps a heart attack or a seizure. Alan stood nearby, arms folded across his chest, watching everything without expression. He answered questions quickly and clearly. He said they had just finished exchanging gifts, said she had sat down and suddenly lost consciousness. When asked if she had a history of medical issues, he said no. The EMTs noted his strange calmness, but people react to trauma in different ways. They focused on Rebecca, trying to revive her, but it was already too late. She was pronounced dead at 11:36 a.m. By early afternoon, the house was cordoned off with yellow tape. Police had arrived after the paramedics raised concerns. Something about the scene felt too quiet, too staged. A seasoned officer noticed the faint bruise on Rebecca's neck, a mark that didn't line up with a natural collapse. It was narrow, symmetrical, almost hand-shaped. The medical examiner was called to the scene. Alan was taken to the station voluntarily. He didn't resist. He answered every question. He said his wife had been under stress, said she had been working too hard. When detectives asked if there were any problems in the marriage, he hesitated, then nodded. He admitted they had been drifting apart, but he insisted they were trying to work through it. His answers were short, but never evasive. Back at the house, investigators began piecing together the scene. They found the laptop still open on the dining room table. They accessed it easily. It wasn't password protected. In the browser history, they found flight searches, real estate listings, and dozens of conversations between Rebecca, using the alias Samantha Hart, and a man named Marcus Delaney. It didn't take long for the full picture to emerge. Rebecca had been living a double life. She had hidden funds, created fake identities, and made plans to flee the country. And she had done it all from the very house she shared with her husband. What had seemed like a tragic accident began to look more like premeditation, just not from the direction anyone expected. An autopsy was scheduled the next morning. The results confirmed what the detectives already suspected. Rebecca had died from manual strangulation. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting she had not fought back or hadn't expected the attack. The bruising on her neck matched the pressure of a person's hands, consistent with a slow, deliberate act of violence. The timeline also aligned too perfectly. Christmas morning, the suitcase in the upstairs closet, the hidden documents. It all pointed to one thing. Alan had discovered her secret, and he had snapped. Detectives returned to the station to question him again, this time with a very different tone. When they told him about the bruising, about the messages they had read, about the money she had moved, he didn't argue. He didn't deny anything. He simply lowered his head and said, "It just happened." He described it as a blur, said he didn't plan it, didn't even feel in control of himself. One moment she was talking, explaining why she needed to leave, and the next, he was standing over her body. He claimed he couldn't remember how it happened, only that it did. The investigators weren't convinced it was a moment of lost control. The discovery of the laptop, the timeline, the fact that he waited until she woke up to confront her, none of it supported a heat-of-the-moment defense. Still, there was no sign of a struggle, no history of abuse, and no witnesses. It would be up to the courts to decide what this really was, an act of passion or something more calculated. As the scene was cleared and the body removed, neighbors began to gather behind the police tape, whispering in disbelief. The Whitmores had always seemed like the ideal couple. No one could imagine something like this happening, especially not on Christmas morning. But the truth was written in the quiet details, the careful planning, the betrayal, the reaction. The picture-perfect home had become a crime scene, and Maple Ridge would never look at the Whitmore house the same way again. The trial of Alan Whitmore drew national attention. The story had everything the media loved: a quiet town, a seemingly perfect marriage, a chilling betrayal, and a murder that happened on Christmas morning. The courtroom was filled day after day with reporters, family members, and locals still stunned by what had unfolded in their own community. Every new piece of evidence painted a more complicated picture, one that blurred the line between victim and perpetrator, love and manipulation, sanity and control. Alan's defense team argued that he had suffered an emotional collapse. They leaned heavily on the narrative of betrayal, that he had discovered not just an affair, but a complete double life. They described how Rebecca had forged his name on financial documents, drained their joint savings, and plotted an international disappearance under a false identity. To the jury, they presented Alan not as a cold-blooded killer, but as a broken man who had been emotionally ambushed. The defense psychiatrist testified that Alan had likely experienced a dissociative state, a psychological blackout triggered by extreme emotional distress. The prosecution didn't buy it. They showed that Alan had time to think, that he waited, that he confronted Rebecca in a calm setting, then chose to end her life with his bare hands. They argued that even if the betrayal was real, nothing justified murder. They emphasized the method, strangulation. It wasn't a crime of panic, they said. It was slow, personal, intentional. The jury listened carefully. The courtroom was silent as the medical examiner explained how long it took for someone to die that way. They showed photos from the autopsy, quieting any lingering doubts. After 2 weeks of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the verdict came in. Alan Whitmore was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. There was no outburst from him when the sentence was read. He simply nodded, as if he had expected it. As he was led away, he passed by photos on the wall. Rebecca smiling, the two of them at parties, on vacation, during happier times. The images felt like ghosts now. But the case didn't end with the verdict. 6 months after Alan began serving his sentence, a woman contacted the Maple Ridge Police Department anonymously. She claimed to have information about the case, about Rebecca, or rather, Samantha Hart. Detectives were skeptical at first, but what she said next changed everything. She provided a location, a safety deposit box in Atlanta registered under the alias. With a warrant, investigators opened it and found a folder filled with documents, passports, bank receipts, and a notarized letter, unsigned, but clearly written by Rebecca. The letter outlined a plan. In vague terms, it referenced a staged disappearance. It spoke of starting over, leaving everything behind, and, if necessary, letting Alan take the fall. There was even a handwritten timeline of steps: when to transfer the last funds, when to leave the country, when to go dark. Authorities also found the finalized paperwork for a $500,000 life insurance policy in Alan's name, with Rebecca listed as the sole beneficiary. The most chilling detail? The policy was set to activate on December 27th, 2 days after her planned departure. Investigators reviewed this new evidence and reopened the case, not to clear Alan of the murder, but to understand the depth of Rebecca's deception. It became apparent that Rebecca may have been preparing for more than just a new life. She may have been preparing a narrative, one in which Alan would be left behind, confused, humiliated, and possibly implicated in her disappearance. Whether she planned to fake her death or simply vanish and leave clues behind was never made fully clear. The documents suggested both possibilities. The discovery of the deposit box reignited debate about the case. Some now believed Alan had been pushed past the point of rational thought. Others still saw the act as unforgivable, no matter what he had uncovered. But everyone agreed on one thing: the woman known as Rebecca Whitmore had not been who she seemed. Even in death, she remained an enigma. Today, the Whitmore house on Hawthorne Lane sits empty. No one has bought it. The lights remain off, the mailbox removed, the grass growing wild. Neighbors pass it quietly, almost reverently, as if afraid to disturb the memory of what happened there. Maple Ridge has returned to normal, on the surface. But beneath the calm, people remember. They remember the Christmas when the snow fell gently, the music played softly. And a man discovered just how far deception can go, and how far someone might fall when everything they believed in is ripped away.